My mother cancelled my job offer and gave it to my sister. Days later, she regretted it. The words echoed in Emma's mind like a haunting refrain, each syllable heavy with the weight of betrayal and confusion. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the crumpled letter that had arrived just 2 weeks ago, the one that had promised her a future. A future now snatched away by someone she trusted more than anyone else in this world, her own mother. It wasn't supposed to be this way. For years, Emma had worked tirelessly, pouring every ounce of energy into building a life for herself. Growing up in their small coastal town, where opportunities were as scarce as sunlight during winter storms, Emma had always known she would have to fight harder than most. Her father passed away when she was only 8, leaving her mother, Clara, to raise both Emma and her younger sister Lily alone. Money was tight, but Clara instilled in them the belief that hard work could overcome any obstacle. And so Emma worked, through school, through college scholarships, through late-night shifts at the diner while studying for exams. She earned her degree in business administration with honors, determined to make something of herself. When the job offer from Marlowe and Company came, a prestigious marketing firm based in the city, it felt like all those sacrifices had finally paid off. The position was everything she dreamed of, challenging, creative, and full of potential for growth. It meant leaving behind the familiar comforts of home, yes, but it also meant stepping into a world where she could truly shine. When she showed the letter to her mother, tears welled up in Clara's eyes, not out of pride though, but something else entirely. Something Emma couldn't quite place at the time. "I'm so proud of you," Clara said softly, pulling Emma into a hug. But there was hesitation in her voice, a flicker of unease that Emma chalked up to maternal worry. After all, letting go wasn't easy, especially not for a mother who had raised her daughters single-handedly. What Emma didn't know then was that Clara already had other plans. Lily was 2 years younger than Emma, with a knack for charm and an ability to slide effortlessly through life. Where Emma struggled and clawed her way forward, Lily seemed to glide, buoyed by natural charisma and an uncanny talent for making people adore her. She hadn't pursued higher education after high school. Instead, she flitted between odd jobs and hobbies, never settling on anything long enough to call it a career. To Clara, this must have been unbearable, a daughter drifting aimlessly while the other soared toward success. Or perhaps it wasn't about comparison at all. Perhaps it was guilt. Guilt over favoring Emma growing up, guilt over expecting too much from her, guilt over failing Lily in ways she couldn't articulate. Whatever the reason, Clara made her decision quickly. Within days of receiving the news about Emma's job offer, she called Marlowe and Company, posing as Emma. "There's been a misunderstanding," she told them, her voice trembling with what sounded like genuine distress. "My family needs me here right now. I won't be able to accept the position." They believed her. Why wouldn't they? She provided all the necessary details, including Emma's social security number, which she'd memorized years ago when filling out forms for school. By the time Emma found out what had happened, it was too late. The company had already moved on, offering the role to another candidate, or so she thought. Then came the bombshell. Lily walked into the kitchen one morning holding an envelope identical to the one Emma had received. Inside was a formal acceptance letter from Marlowe and Company, addressed to her. At first, Emma assumed it was some cruel joke. But no, Lily confirmed it with wide-eyed excitement. "Mom helped me apply," she exclaimed, practically bouncing with joy. "Isn't that amazing?" Emma turned to Clara, whose face was pale and drawn, her lips pressed into a thin line. "You didn't think I'd get far without your help anyway," Clara said defensively, though her voice wavered. "Lily needs this chance more than you do. You're stronger, Emma. You'll find something else." Something inside Emma shattered. Not because of the lost opportunity, though that stung deeply, but because of the sheer audacity of it. Her mother had taken away her dream, handed it to her sister, and justified it with lies about strength and resilience. As if being strong meant enduring betrayal without complaint. The weeks that followed were a blur of anger and heartbreak. Emma avoided both her mother and Lily, retreating into silence whenever they tried to speak to her. She spent hours scrolling through job listings online, applying to anything remotely relevant, but nothing compared to the promise of Marlowe and Company. Each rejection email felt like salt in an open wound. Meanwhile, Lily prepared for her new role with unbridled enthusiasm, oblivious to, or perhaps deliberately ignoring, the tension brewing around her. Clara, on the other hand, began to unravel. At first, Emma mistook her mother's newfound quietness for guilt. But as the days dragged on, Clara grew increasingly withdrawn, snapping at even the smallest provocation. One evening during dinner, she pushed her plate aside and stared blankly at the wall. "I don't know what I've done," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Emma froze, fork halfway to her mouth. "What did you say?" she asked, though she already knew. Clara looked up, her eyes bloodshot and brimming with tears. "I thought I was doing the right thing," she admitted. "For Lily. For us. But now I can't stop thinking about how unfair it was. How selfish." For a moment, Emma considered confronting her, demanding answers, forcing her to acknowledge the depth of her betrayal. But something held her back, a flicker of pity maybe, or the realization that her mother's regret wouldn't undo the damage. Instead, she stood abruptly and left the room, leaving Clara to sit alone in the dim light of the kitchen. As the days turned into weeks, the household dynamic shifted in strange and unsettling ways. Lily, once thrilled about her impending move to the city, began to show signs of doubt. She complained about the training materials sent by Marlowe and Company, claiming they were overwhelming and confusing. "Maybe I'm not cut out for this," she muttered one night, flipping through a binder of notes with a frustrated sigh. Emma watched her from across the living room, torn between sympathy and resentment. Part of her wanted to reach out, to offer guidance and support the way she always had. But another part, the angrier, more wounded part, wanted to let Lily figure it out on her own. Let her experience the same struggles Emma faced daily, the same pressures she had shouldered for years without complaint. Still, despite her bitterness, Emma couldn't ignore the growing cracks in Lily's confidence. It became clear that her sister wasn't equipped for the demands of the job, not yet anyway. And as much as Emma resented her mother's interference, she couldn't deny that Lily might fail spectacularly if left unsupported. The thought filled her with conflicting emotions, satisfaction at the prospect of justice served, but also dread at the idea of watching her sister crumble under the weight of expectations neither of them had chosen. Meanwhile, Clara's behavior grew increasingly erratic. She stopped sleeping properly, pacing the house late at night and muttering to herself. On several occasions, Emma caught her staring at old photographs of their father, her expression unreadable. Once, she overheard her mother on the phone, speaking in hushed tones to someone unnamed. "I don't know how to fix this," Clara said, her voice breaking. "I thought I was helping, but now everything feels wrong." Emma wanted to confront her, to demand an explanation, to force her to take responsibility for the chaos she had created. But every time she opened her mouth, the words caught in her throat. What good would it do? Apologies wouldn't erase the pain, and promises of change wouldn't restore the trust that had been broken. All she could do was wait, watching as the fragile threads holding their family together began to fray. One afternoon, a week before Lily was set to start her new job, Clara called everyone into the living room. Her hands trembled as she clutched a piece of paper, her knuckles white against the faded blue ink. "I need to tell you something," she began, her voice shaky but resolute. "About the job. About everything." Emma exchanged a glance with Lily, whose brow furrowed in confusion. Whatever Clara was about to say, it was clear she had been carrying it for a long time. The air in the room seemed to thicken, charged with anticipation and fear. But before Clara could continue, the sound of a car engine cut through the silence. A sleek black sedan pulled into the driveway, its tires crunching against the gravel. Emma frowned, recognizing the logo on the side, Marlowe and Company. Her stomach dropped as the driver stepped out, smoothing his suit jacket and adjusting his tie. He approached the front door with purpose, knocking sharply before waiting for someone to answer. Clara's face went pale, her grip tightening on the paper in her hands. No one moved to open the door. They simply stared at each other, frozen in place, as the knock came again, louder this time, more insistent. Whatever secrets Clara had been keeping, it seemed they were about to come crashing down around them. The tension in the room was suffocating as the knock echoed through the house for a third time. Emma's heart pounded in her chest, each beat reverberating like a drum roll leading up to some catastrophic finale. She glanced at Clara, who stood frozen, her face drained of color, the paper in her hands trembling violently now. Lily sat on the edge of the couch, her wide eyes darting between her mother and the front door, confusion etched into every line of her expression. Finally, unable to bear the silence any longer, Emma stepped forward. "Shouldn't someone answer that?" she asked sharply, her voice cutting through the thick air like a blade. Clara flinched but didn't respond. Instead, she looked down at the crumpled paper in her hands, her lips moving silently as though rehearsing words she couldn't bring herself to say aloud. The knocking came again, this time more forceful, almost impatient, and Emma felt a surge of frustration bubbling up inside her. "Fine," she snapped, striding toward the door with deliberate steps. Her fingers curled around the doorknob, cold and unyielding beneath her palm. For a moment she hesitated, bracing herself for whatever, or whoever, was waiting on the other side. Then, with a deep breath, she pulled the door open. Standing there was a tall man in a tailored suit, his posture rigid and authoritative. His sharp features were softened slightly by the polite smile he offered, though his piercing blue eyes betrayed an underlying seriousness. He held out a hand, introducing himself in a smooth, measured tone. "Good afternoon. My name is Mr. Gregory Hensley. I'm here from Marlowe and Company." Emma's stomach twisted into knots. She recognized the name instantly. It belonged to one of the senior executives at the company, someone whose reputation preceded him even before she'd applied for the job. Her mind raced, trying to piece together why he would show up at their doorstep unannounced. Was this about Lily? About the position Clara had manipulated away from her? Or was it something else entirely? Before she could respond, Clara appeared behind her, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mr. Hensley," she swallowed hard, visibly struggling to compose herself. "Please, come in." He nodded curtly, stepping past Emma and into the living room without hesitation. His presence seemed to fill the space, commanding attention even as he remained silent. Emma closed the door slowly, her pulse hammering in her ears. She followed him back into the living room, where Clara had taken a seat on the armchair, gripping the edges so tightly her knuckles turned white. Lily, still perched on the couch, looked utterly bewildered, her gaze flickering nervously between her mother and the stranger. Mr. Hensley surveyed the room with a practiced calm, his eyes lingering briefly on each of them before settling on Clara. "Mrs. Bennet," he began, his tone formal yet tinged with an unmistakable edge of reproach. "I trust you know why I'm here." Clara's jaw tightened, and for a moment, she said nothing. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked under the weight of emotion. "Yes," she admitted softly, her head bowed. "I assumed, after everything." Emma's eyes narrowed as she studied her mother's reaction. Whatever this was, Clara clearly knew more than she was letting on. But what exactly had brought Marlowe and Company to their doorstep? And how much did they know? "I'll cut straight to the point," Mr. Hensley continued, pulling a folder from his briefcase and placing it carefully on the coffee table. "We recently uncovered discrepancies in the application process for the marketing associate position your daughter," he paused, glancing pointedly at Lily, then at Emma, "or rather both of your daughters, were involved in." Emma's breath hitched. She stared at him, her mind racing. Discrepancies? What did that mean? Had someone discovered Clara's deception? Or was there more to it? Clara shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her hands twisting together in her lap. "I understand," she murmured, avoiding his gaze. "And I take full responsibility for my actions." "Actions?" Emma interjected, her voice rising despite herself. She turned to Clara, her anger bubbling dangerously close to the surface. "What are you talking about? What actions?" Clara winced but didn't answer. It was Mr. Hensley who spoke next, his voice steady and implacable. "It has come to our attention that certain irregularities occurred during the vetting process for this role. Specifically, we found evidence suggesting that an individual impersonated Emma Bennet in communications with our hiring team, effectively withdrawing her candidacy without her knowledge or consent." Emma's knees nearly buckled beneath her. Hearing it confirmed, hearing it laid out so starkly, made the betrayal feel fresh all over again. She clenched her fists, fighting back tears as rage and humiliation surged within her. "You knew," she whispered, turning to Clara. "You knew they figured it out." Clara's shoulders slumped, and when she looked up, her eyes were filled with shame. "They contacted me last week," she confessed, her voice breaking. I thought if I handled it quietly, maybe no one would have to find out. Maybe I could fix it before it got worse." "Fix it?" Emma repeated, incredulous. "How do you fix lying to a multinational corporation? How do you fix stealing my future and handing it to someone who doesn't deserve it?" "Emma," Lily cried, her voice tinged with hurt. "That's not fair." "No, Lily," Emma shot back, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. What's not fair is having your dreams ripped away because Mom decided she knew better than me. What's not fair is watching you waltz into a life you didn't earn while I'm left to pick up the pieces." Lily recoiled, tears welling up in her eyes. "I didn't ask for this," she protested weakly. "I didn't know what she did, I swear. If I had known." "But you didn't ask questions, did you?" Emma countered, her tone bitter. "You just took it. You always take what isn't yours." "That's enough," Mr. Hensley interrupted, his voice firm but not unkind. He opened the folder on the table and extracted a document, sliding it across to Clara. "As I was saying, these irregularities have serious implications, not only for the integrity of our hiring process but also for those involved. We've conducted a thorough investigation, and based on the findings, we've decided to rescind the offer extended to Miss Lily Bennett." Lily gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "What? No, that can't be right. You can't." "I'm afraid it's non-negotiable," Mr. Hensley replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. "However, given the circumstances, we're prepared to extend a revised offer to Miss Emma Bennett, contingent upon her willingness to reapply formally and undergo additional screening." Emma blinked, stunned. The words barely registered, her mind struggling to process what he was saying. A second chance? After everything? She wanted to feel relief, gratitude, anything, but instead she felt hollow, as though the ground beneath her feet had shifted too many times to ever feel stable again. "And as for you, Mrs. Bennett," Mr. Hensley added, fixing Clara with a steely gaze, "your actions constitute a breach of ethics that cannot go unchecked. While we won't pursue legal action at this time, I strongly urge you to consider the impact of your decisions, not just on your daughters, but on yourself as well." Clara nodded mutely, tears streaming down her face. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of her mistakes. For the first time, Emma saw her not as the indomitable matriarch who had raised them single-handedly, but as a flawed, broken woman grappling with the consequences of her choices. Silence fell over the room, heavy and oppressive. Emma stared at the document on the table, her thoughts a chaotic whirlwind. Part of her wanted to refuse the offer outright, to walk away and leave the mess behind. But another part, the part that still clung desperately to hope, whispered that this might be her only chance to reclaim what had been stolen from her. "Emma," Clara pleaded softly, breaking the silence. "Please say something." Emma turned to look at her mother, her expression unreadable. There was so much she wanted to say, so much anger and pain bottled up inside her. But in that moment, all she could manage was a single quiet question. "Why?" Clara hesitated, searching her daughter's face as though hoping to find forgiveness there. When she finally spoke, her voice was raw with emotion. "Because I was scared," she admitted. "Scared of losing you both. Scared of failing you the way I failed your father. I thought if I gave Lily this opportunity, it would make things right. But I see now that I only made everything worse." Emma didn't respond. She simply turned away, her gaze drifting back to the document on the table. The room felt smaller somehow, the walls closing in as the weight of the situation pressed down on her. She knew she had a decision to make, one that would shape not only her future but the fragile bonds holding her family together. But as she stood there, caught between fury and uncertainty, one thing became painfully clear: forgiveness wouldn't come easily. And neither would redemption. Emma stared at the document, her mind a storm of conflicting emotions. Finally she spoke, her voice steady but laced with resolve. "I'll take the offer," she said, looking at Mr. Hensley. "But on one condition: Lily comes with me." Lily's head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock. "What?" "Emma, You're not ready for this job alone," Emma interrupted, her tone firm but not unkind. "If you really want it, you'll learn. From me." Clara looked at Emma, tears streaming down her face. "You'd do that? After everything?" Emma met her mother's gaze, her heart heavy but resolute. "Not for you. For us. This family is broken, but maybe we can fix it together." Mr. Hensley nodded approvingly. "An admirable decision. We'll adjust the terms accordingly." As he left, the room fell silent once more. Emma turned to Lily, offering a tentative smile. "This isn't charity. You'll work harder than you ever have." Lily wiped her tears and nodded, determination flickering in her eyes. "I will. I promise." Clara watched them, her hands trembling as she clasped them together. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "for giving us another chance." Emma didn't respond immediately. Instead, she stepped outside, breathing in the cool evening air. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of hope. Behind her, Lily joined her on the porch. "We'll make this right," Lily said softly. "Together." Emma glanced at her sister, seeing not the rival she'd resented but someone who, like her, was fighting to find her place. "Yes," she replied. "We will." Inside, Clara sat alone, clutching a photo of their father. Her choices had torn them apart, but perhaps, just perhaps, they could rebuild what was lost. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light over the small coastal town. It was a new beginning, one fraught with challenges, sacrifices, and healing. But as Emma stood there, flanked by her sister, she realized forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. It was about moving forward. And move forward they would. Together.